So as you have seen on the board, the lecture is basal nuclei lesion. You're all aware that basal nuclei are collections of subcortical nuclei or structures. Since they are subcortical, it means they are below the cerebral cortex. So they are nuclei, collections of neurons, cell bodies that are found below the cortex. That is why they are called subcortical collections of nuclei. So these include about 5 important structures. The first one is what we call caudate nucleus. If you can remember, caudate nucleus has a head, it has a body, and then it has a tail. Towards the tail end, you have the amygdaloid body. That is caudate. Then we also have the putamen and the globus pallidus. This putamen and the globus pallidus, they are just inside cerebral cortex. So the outermost part of, the lentiform nucleus, because the putamen and the globus pallidus there is known as lentiform nucleus. Lentiform nucleus so include the putamen, which is the outermost part of the lentiform nucleus, and then the globus pallidus. This is the globus pallidus. Are you clear? And the globus pallidus is also further subdivided into 2. We have what we call the globus pallidus interna, and then we have globus pallidus externa. So now, based on this diagram, we all know that this caudate nucleus, is just around the lentiform nucleus. So we have the putamen, we have the globus pallidus, and then we also have the subthalamic nucleus. And then we finally have substantia nigra that is just above the midbrain, but below the thalamus. So these are the 5 collections of nuclei or structures that constitute the basal nuclei. The caudate nucleus, together with putamen, they are called striatum. So they are called what? Striatum. So striatum they are called corpus striatum because they look like a stria body. So the caudate nucleus and the putamen together they are called corpus striatum. So now we've seen the 5 structures that make up the basal nuclei. So now what are the functions of these collections of this basal nuclei? All of these nuclei group together to perform certain functions. And basically the major functions of this basal nuclei is to coordinate our motor movement, voluntary motor movement. So I said the major function of this basal nuclei is to coordinate our voluntary motor movement. This coordination is divided into what you call both direct and indirect pathway. You get it? The direct pathway is responsible for initiation of our motor movement. That means kick starting. It's just like when you have a car, you want to start it. You have to put the key and then you start it. So you kick start it. So the kick starting of our motor movement, that is initiation of our voluntary motor movement, is through this direct pathway. You get it? Similarly, to regulate or stop unwanted involuntary motor movement, as a result of this, our initiation of motor movement is a function of the indirect pathway. So that means the direct pathway is responsible for beginning of our movement, while the indirect pathway is responsible for the stoppage of our movement. This one starts, this one stops. Are you clear? So when you start, when your limbs begin to move, at the end of the day they will stop. You get it? So initiation, starting and stopping of this movement is through direct and indirect pathway. The direct pathway begins from information coming from the cerebral cortex. It goes to the striatum, that means it goes through the putamen and the globus pallidum, through the caudate nucleus and the putamen. These are the striatum. So the motor information for beginning of a movement comes from the cerebral cortex. That information passes through the striatum, that means through the caudate nucleus and the putamen, and then finally it goes into the globus pallidus internus and the substantia nigra before it finally reaches the thalamus. From the thalamus, it now goes back into the cerebral cortex, so that finally motor movement is going to be started. You start and then continue with your motor movement. While the indirect pathway now, the information, comes through the striatum, then to the globus pallidus externus, then from there to the subthalamic nucleus. From there now it now goes into the globus pallidus internus and substantia nigra. And then from the substantia nigra, the information now passes into the thalamus, and from the thalamus now it goes into the cerebral cortex. And finally, this one is the one that is going to stop any unwanted voluntary movement. You get it? Any unwanted movement that is going to be associated with our movement. So this is just, in brief, the functions of the direct and indirect pathway. Apart from these two important functions, basal nuclei are also responsible for motor learning. What do you mean by motor learning? That means for you to learn some skills, motor skills, like how to ride a bike. Like myself, I don't know how to ride a bike, motorcycle or tricycle. But if I want to learn it today, I can start learning. So now to learn this motor skill of how to ride, that is what we call motor learning. Or if we want to know how to ride a horse, not all of us here knows how to ride a horse. But if you now try to go and learn how to ride a horse, that is also part of the motor learning. So the basal nuclei is also responsible for motor learning. Are you clear? Even emotion is also part of the functions of, the basal nuclei, and also memory is also part of it. So apart from these two, one major important function, that is coordination of our motor movement, these are other functions of the basal nuclei. So now, what are the causes of the lesions of the basal nuclei? Like it, majority of the cases of this basal nuclei problem is to do with the degenerative diseases that affect especially the, some part of the nuclei, the substantia nigra, for example, and some other nuclei there. Apart from the degenerative diseases, things like the trauma, injury, metabolic diseases like hypertension, diabetes mellitus, due to the blockage of the arterial supply to the basal nuclei, because this nuclei now in the cerebral hemispheres, they are being supplied by blood supply. So the blood supply may be blocked or may rupture. And at the end of the day, the nuclei may be devoid of the blood supply, and so we are going to have what we call basal nuclei lesion. So what are the features of, the motor, the basal nuclei disorders? The first one is what we call motor disorders. Part of the motor disorders is what we call chorea. This chorea, spelling is C-H-O-R-E-A, chorea. This chorea is spasmodic, involuntary motor movement of our muscles, of the limbs, upper limbs, lower limbs, and even the trunk. So once you have spasmodic, involuntary motor movement of any of our part of the muscles in the body, that is what you call chorea. You get it? There's also what we call arteriosis. This arteriosis is slow, repetitive, involuntary motor movement. What do you mean by this? Somebody that wants to make a type, you want to type on a computer or on your handset. When you now keep your iPad or your phone or your computer, you want to type, on your word, you want to type your name, my name is so. Somebody with this kind of disease, you will not even know the time when the finger will drop on the keyboard. And when the finger drops on the keyboard, you will not even know which of the keyboard is going to drop. If you want it to drop on letter A, probably it may drop into letter X or letter Z. So you don't have control of the movement of this, and it will just keep on repeating, and so you will not even know, what is going on with the hand, because it will just be pressing, any alphabet, but you want to press one alphabet, maybe A or B or C or whatever, but your finger, you don't have control on it. So it will just drop whatever it wants to drop. That is what we call, arthrosis. Similarly, we have what we call dystonia. This dystonia is continuous, involuntary muscle contractions of our own body, different from this arthrosis, which is slow, and it is also, continuous. You get it? While arthrosis is continuous, dystonia is, intermittent, is repetitive. It repeats and it stops, then it repeats. So that's the difference between the two. So now you also have what you call hemibalismus. The hemibalismus, which is part of the complaints of this patient with basal nuclei lesion, is sudden and violently involuntary motor movement. The involuntary motor movement, your limb just voluntarily move suddenly, just like you see it, taking place. So it's sudden, violently involuntary motor movement of our limbs. You get it? Just like as you are sitting down, you just see your leg like this. It suddenly moves involuntarily like that. That is what you call hemibalismus, and it's part of the presentation of patient with basal nuclei lesion. Finally, people with this basal nuclei, if it affects more or less the substantia nigra, we are going to have what is known as Parkinsonism. This Parkinson disease affects mainly one of the nuclei of the basal nuclei, that is the substantia nigra, which more or less modulates our motor movement. And at the end of the day, that person with Parkinson disease, we have inability to initiate the motor movement, which is part of the function of the basal nucleus. That is through the direct pathway. So there is problem with initiation of our motor movement. The indirect pathway responsible for stopping the unwanted movement in our own body, since substantia nigra is affected, which modulate these two pathways in the basal nuclei. So there is definitely going to be difficulty in stopping any unwanted movement that person initiates, if at all that person initiates a motor movement. So there is difficulty in initiating and stopping motor movement. And there is one very peculiar gait that these Parkinson people have, what you call shuffling gait. You see them moving as they start walking, as if they have been pushed, stop, pushed, and then they continue like that. That's what you call shuffling gait. You get it? So, and they also have, some resting tremor. When they are sitting down, you see them having tremors in the limbs, especially in the toes, if they are sitting on the chair, or maybe they are sitting at rest, you see the fingers or the hands just shaking. That is what we call resting tremor. So there are certain features peculiar to this Parkinson disease Probably in the next of my videos, I will likely discuss the actual, Parkinson's disease and the actual, features of these patients with Parkinson's disease. So I'm going to stop here, and maybe next time I'm going to discuss another, part of the clinical anatomy of, neuroanatomy.